Shall we start? Thank you very much for coming along after Christmas. For some people, maybe, bless you. Some people who are terribly ill. Critically reflective practitioner. Just a couple of things before we start, really. The listing as to who's got whose tutor, right? Who's got who as a tutor, is on the notice board downstairs outside E207, which is where all the early childhood studies is. If you're not on the list, and it's on Blackboard as well, if you're not on the list, come and see me and I'll allocate you a tutor. Secondly, this filming here is filming for the Greek students who are also doing this course as well. All we're going to do, all I'm going to do, is stand here and deliver the lecture. It's being filmed, we make a DVD of it and send it over to Greece. Okay, so that's all that is there. I'm going to try and speak loudly because I'm conscious that this machine here doesn't pick up sound. It doesn't pick up sound very well. So if I appear to be talking like that, then you know the reason why. Okay, critically reflective practitioner. Core course, 20 points. Hand-in date, I believe, the 29th of April. And it is a two-part submission. The first part, which is the larger bit, is about you and your practice. There's a bit on there. The first bit, which is the larger bit, is not e-submission. In other words, you hand it in, okay, at that little bubble office downstairs near the atrium. Yeah. Has everybody signed the form? Yeah. Okay. The second part, which is much smaller, is e-submission. So we've got two bits there. What we're going to go through today is, let me have a think now, 70-30, I think. Yes, 70% is the value of the first bit and 30% is the value of the second bit. So, you all get this PowerPoint at the end of today anyway. Okay, it's on Blackboard already. So, critically reflective practitioner. Can we go on to then? Oh. Okay. I'm making a presumption that all of you have downloaded the module handbook. Would I be correct in that assumption, by and large? If you haven't, I have some copies here. Who would like a copy? I hope it's not more than 5, because I've only got 5. Okay. So we're going to have a brief look at the module handbook. We're going to look at the learning assessments, learning outcomes assessments. We will have a quick breeze through communities of practice, and then, as I've already mentioned, you need to make sure that you've got a tutor allocated, because this is like independent studies. You have one starter lecture. There are a number of lectures, sessions throughout the term, and it only lasts a term. And you're nominated a tutor, so you work it out the same way as you work out, independent studies. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. This is the schedule. This is also on blackboard as well. Has everybody got one of those? Yes? Excellent. Right. You can see, if you refer to your copy, that that's today, that bit there, introduction to the module. Val runs a session, Val runs a session on the 25th of Feb. It says end 7:04 in there, I need to check up on that, it may well be 5:04. There's also a seminar on the 4th of March, and there's also another session on the 8th of April. They're not mandatory sessions, although you may wish to come along to find out a little bit more about the module, because the main point of where you can find out information for this is your individual tutor. So that's what the schedule looks like. They're the learning outcomes. I'm not going to read them out because you can all read. It's in the module handbook anyway. I think one of the most important words here is this word critical. This module builds on emerging practitioner and developing practitioner, for those of you who have come through early childhood studies. But the idea about criticality and being critical about things, and that doesn't mean slagging off your setting, is a core element of this. It's a development from stage, from level 5. So those are really, those two apply to the bigger piece of work. This one here applies to the smaller piece of work. Let's do all of these. Shoot some words there as well. And we'll come to this a little bit later. This is a module where you talk about you, particularly and mainly in the first component. Okay? Which means you have to do some thinking, some reviewing about how you've got where you are now, the events that may have happened in the past, and look at your journey. Some people do a little flow chart sometimes, which looks at they look back at their own individual career progression or being a student or whatever it might be, and they look at points at which they've made decisions and why they may have made those decisions at the time. In other words, they look back, they reflect on their journey. This is a little diagram here which I call the reflecting, I should call it person really, although it's obviously a girl. And this gives you some idea of the kinds of things that you need to take on board, the kinds of things you need to think about. I called this one breadth of thinking. It stands for, this is me, this is what I do, this is what I think about what I do, and that is what it's like to think about what I do. Shall I repeat that? Yeah? This is who I am. This is what I do at work, play, whatever. That's my reflection on what I do, and that's how it feels to reflect. So it may well be a useful framework. It's not for me to tell you how to review your own histories, okay? It must be staringly obvious to you as well that all your assignments will be different because you're all individual people. Thank goodness. However, there are some people who have said some things about critical reflection. One of them is Jürgen Habermas here. Okay. One of them is Michel Foucault, and I have to be careful when I say that here. You may want to look to explore some of the things that they say about critical thinking and critical theory. You may do. A good assignment would. Jürgen Habermas, Habermas, one S actually, Habermas. Foucault, Foucault. Both of these guys come from 1970s, 1980s. So, breadth of thinking. This one I call depth. I'll leave that thing there. You know, this is me, this is what I do, this is what I think about what I do, and that's what it feels like about what I do. This is about more thinking about possibilities. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of depth, and as I say, I'll repeat again, it's not for me to tell you how to think, okay? But you do need to be analytical, and you do need to sit down and analyse your journey for the purposes of the first component. And this is the one I call direction. We've got some more scratchy little diagrams coming up here. For those of you who know me, you get a lot of scratchy little diagrams, unprofessionally produced. All this is meant to depict is that's you as a reflective practitioner. That may well be your journey as you write this assignment to become a critically reflective practitioner. That's all that is meant to mean. Okay? And the way in which you could become a critically reflective practitioner is to consider, for instance, those two guys on the slide a couple of times ago, what people say about the thing called critical theory. And this little block here, remember you get all this little block here suggests that many people say many things about it and there is no consensus. For instance, Jürgen Habermas, the guy who was the picture above, considers that when you critically reflect, that you ought to be critically reflecting about social justice and inequality and fairness and diversity, whatever those words might be to you. Michel Foucault, who's probably further this way, who was the other guy, he considers those things are all very well and good, but we need to be exploring in more depth what things mean and why we think the way we think. Power dimensions. Okay, so that's all that's meant to depict. A direction of thinking. Okay, now, next one. Oh, no. Oh, I go back. How do I go back?
Previous at the top.
Previous, yeah. Who's that? Sherlock Holmes. Absolutely right. On the CRP blackboard, there are some bits of information under study materials which have got quite a bit of information on. One of them points you to a little article about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Okay? Now, the reason it points you in that direction is because some of the thinking that you're going to have to do is going to be much more about Holmes than it is about Watson. Watson, if you recall, spent all his time wandering about, flitting around, looking at possibilities, skating over information. Skitty, I think I called him, right? Whereas Holmes here sits and smokes his pipe and thinks extremely deeply about things. You probably have to be more Sherlock than you do Watson for this. And 3 pipefuls isn't going to do you a bad thing, really. So, you need some space to think. You need some space to do these things. Also, I've written up there inside out. I'll come back to that. So these things are pretty straightforward, right? Review what you're good at, bring things together, relate theory to practice. All will become a little bit more obvious a bit later. Now, we're still talking about the first component here. For the first component, there are formative bits and there are summative bits. That's edgiolinguo for formative things are things that you do. Some people call it the actual learning that takes place. Okay? It forms the summative bit. The summative bit is the assignment, a summary. So you do formative things, thinking, these sorts of activities, which I'll go into in a minute, and those are the, as some people say, the actual place where the learning takes place. The summative bit, which is the essay, is the bit where you show where the learning's taken place. Okay? So, we suggest here for formative, and formative work is not assessed, okay, is that you create what's called an annotated bibliography. And you do this in conjunction with your tutor. An annotated bibliography is long gobbledygook words for, you read the chapter of a book, you write down what the main points are, and then you write down in a paragraph after that of what value these main points might be to you. And that's simply all it is. It can be 150, 200 words. Yeah.
And it's not marked.
Sorry? And it's not marked, no. It is used, but it's not marked. Let me give an example of this inside-out thing I mentioned earlier. Last year, one student sat down and she got a Sherlock Holmes Deerstalker out. And she sat down, she looked at the way in which she progressed as a practitioner. She was working at the time, she still is now. And she worked out, quite rightly in her particular situation, that she had got on in her career mainly by being in the right place at the right time, which is not uncommon. Okay? So from inside of her, this is the inside out bit, she needed to write about her journey, and one of the aspects of her journey was about being in the right place at the right time. I think what happened was that she happened to be working in a nursery and a new one opened round the corner, literally round the corner, okay? And she happened to know the deputy officer in charge because they live in the same village. She went along and saw where they were advertising for, I think, a room leader or something like this, was some time ago. And she got the job, okay? Now that she wouldn't have got that job had she not known the person who happened to live in the same village and the village that she had been brought up in. Okay, so there was an element of luck in there for her, okay? Because if she'd have been in Derby, for instance, she wouldn't have got to know about it. It just wouldn't have happened. So there was an element of luck. And when she did some of her annotated bibliography, she went back and looked for people who had written about the importance of luck in people's career progressions. So she started with something that happened to her inside and looked out for, if you like, not proof, but evidence that luck is quite an important aspect in career progression. So she worked inside out. And that worked quite well, because what it means is that any studies that you do for any annotated bibliographies are related to your experience. You're not going out and reading stuff that isn't or might not be relevant. You're using it to take what you've got inside of you and backing it up by doing little studies of chapters in books, or it might be half a journal, or it could be anything. Okay? So she went back and produced an annotated, just one, okay, about the importance of luck in people getting on in their careers. So that's an example, if you like, of this inside-out thing. Now, as this assignment is about you, okay, it's not wrong to do that at all, because it's about you. All these assignments will be different, okay? So, between now and when you start to write your essay, if you like, coursework, component 1, you can discuss with your tutor about what annotated bibliographies, or ABs we'll call them from now on, what you want to go and have a look at, having looked inside yourself, if you like, right? And the tutor will provide you with feedback on them. He or she won't mark them, and they're not assessed, okay? But they're there to talk, for something to talk about, okay? In addition to ABs, some of you may well have, and some people do create, a reflective diary. A reflective diary is simply, and it doesn't have to be formal, okay, you can write it on the however you want to. Reflective diary, I think some of you may have done it for DP. Did you used to do that sort of thing in developing practitioner? Yeah? You know, piece of paper, this is what I did, that's what I thought about it, this is what I might do differently next time. Okay? And it doesn't matter what format it's in, because the most important thing is to do it and to feel what it's like to do it. If you do it, you know, in a little notebook, or it doesn't have to be in a great big file, it's not assessed, okay? But it does provide you with fodder to talk about your history and your career progression. So, two things for formative. Annotated bibliography, you don't have to do 10 of them, or 5 of them, or 2 of them, but when you write your essay, it's very good to put them in as an appendix and refer to them, because you've got there some work that you've done, you've talked about it with your tutor, okay, and you can refer in your essay to anything that you found out through that. Similarly, this last term's ones, we had a vast range of different people's reflective diaries. They were written, not typed. It doesn't matter. It's the process of doing the thing. So that's the formative stuff, and you do that as soon as you meet your tutor, really. And this is the summative stuff. Formative, the actual learning. Summative, the way you evidence it. I'm not going to read it out again. We do need that's about you, that first sentence. Okay. We do need a personal professional development plan. The format for that is on Blackboard. Okay. This will be a continuation, I suspect, of, I know it's a continuation from Developing Practitioner, but for people not coming from that thing, I'm sure they've got elements of PDP, you know, professional development over the past 2 years or so. So you've got a critical review of your journey, you've got a personal development plan. This is all in the first component, and evidence to back up your personal development plan. Let me use an example, okay? One student developed a particular interest over the past 3, 4, 5 years in working with children whose first language wasn't English. When she looked back on her career, she thought, hey, hang on a minute, that's something that's coming out of this is what's happening to me. I'm beginning to develop a skill, you know, or an interest at least in working with children whose first language wasn't English. Okay, it could be anything, but let's use that as an example. So when she wrote her piece here, she talked about that as how that interest developed and why, and things that happened to her and things that struck her about those sorts of children, right? She then wrote in her personal development plan, one line of it was about developing that skill even more. And in order to evidence that, she was able to put in the fact that she was looking to do section, what used to be called Section 11 work, which is now EAL work, and going on courses or going on modules or whatever it might be related to Sure Start in her case, about working, you know, going on courses and training days and things like that about EAL, English as an Additional Language. So what we had with hers was a thread that she talked about in her essay bit there, her journey bit, a line in her personal development plan, and some evidence. And she had the emails that she'd been sending and the adverts for courses, those sorts of things, and that was the evidence. So that worked quite well for her. So essay, PDP, evidence. That's the reason that this is not electronic submission, because in your appendix where you put the evidence, there's going to be a huge variety of different things in there that evidence the things that you're looking to do to demonstrate that you're engaged with your own future. So that's the main one, 70%. This one here is about, says there, an essay reflecting on and analysing a contemporary issue, 1,000 words, 2 pages, 2 or 3 pages. What you do with this one is you choose a contemporary issue, an article that you've read somewhere, anywhere. Val doesn't like references to the Sun or the Daily Mail for things like that, but whatever, right? I've seen ones from Heat magazine. Not that I read it. Take a break. You know, yeah. Because what you're doing there is you are something comes up in Take a Break, for example. I don't use Take a Break necessarily, right? Which talks about parents or something like that, whatever it might say. And you use that as a starting point to explore it much more and involve yourself in research and finding out a lot more about the particular thing that triggered that particular issue, whatever it might be. Nursery World is good for that, I is good for it, Guardian's good for it, anything. But my point is it's just a starting point. Now, there's a scratchy little diagram. In fact, there's two of them coming up, okay, which look more complicated than they are. Some of you might find a helpful way of doing it. Some people might not. There's scratchy diagram number 1. That's to do with the first coursework, and this is just a repeat. When you get all this, this is just a repeat of what I've said. There's your AB. Okay, these are formative bits, remember. There's your reflective diary, and there's a little format for a reflective diary. What I did, what I thought, what I learned from it. Okay, that's all it is. So they're the formative bits. And here is your essay. The journey, your journey. 2,500 words. Okay? And as I've said before, if you do your ABs, they can become references which could feed into your essay, like that, where that little arrow there is. You don't have to use all of them because you may well find other ones as you're going along. These are the themes. One of those might be EAL, one of them might be, I've suddenly found out that I'd like to be a swimming instructor. It doesn't matter, okay? Or I'd like to run in the Olympic Games of 2019 or whatever, okay? The themes, as I've said, remember the EAL example, you talk about the development of the theme in the essay, it trickles into the PDP, okay? And then we have bits of evidence that support it in the PDP, and that's all that is. It's not meant to be, as you can see, it's just a thought pattern more than anything. Okay? So we've got 2,500 words in your essay, 500 words in your PDP. Okay? Appendices don't count as words, I mean. So that's all that is. And this is the second. This is the second one. You read Heat magazine, you see an article about parenting, whatever it says, okay? You talk about what the main points of the article are, and then you take some of them and develop them up to level 6. Okay? Now, if you choose a journal, let's say you see an article in a journal. I don't know whether you spend your Saturdays reading educational journals, because I certainly don't spend mine doing it. If you choose a journal already, you'll have a problem developing up to level 6 because it already is. Okay? That's why you start with an article which you could say is in the media somewhere. It can be a television program, it can be anything. You look at the main points that it brings out and you choose some and you develop them through extra research up to level 6. Okay? That's the main bulk of this smaller essay. As usual with essays, you start with an introduction. We do like a little bit as to why you chose the article that you chose. Okay? Little summary, little conclusion, 1,000 words. Be gone in a flash. You could write it in your sleep. So, how about that? That's all to it. Are there any questions? And if you don't, have you got any questions? Goodness me, I've explained it well. Okay. Right. There we go then. Sorry, I didn't see your hand go up. Yes. I hope you're on it.